Welcome to Lesson 25, Bank Rules. To begin this lesson, go to the QuickBooks Online demo account as discussed in Lesson 4. Once you convert to QuickBooks Online, each morning you will go to Banking on the navigation bar and click Update to synchronize your bank and credit card accounts. And at this point, you should be comfortable with how to categorize your bank and credit card transactions when they come in on that daily feed update. Once you start this process, you will notice that QuickBooks Online looks for trends in your choices and begins to pre-fill information in an attempt to make your life easier. For instance, once you categorize a few staples purchases under office supplies, you may find that the category drop-down will be pre-populated with office supplies the next time a staples transaction comes through. This is a nice feature, but you should always double-check your entries before adding them. Perhaps that last purchase at Staples was for printing rather than office supplies. There are times, however, when you are absolutely certain of how transactions should be handled, and you could save yourself some time and effort by creating what are called bank rules. Bank rules go beyond the automatic memorizing and categorizing that QuickBooks Online does. For all downloaded items, rules you create are checked against all transactions. You can have rules for specific accounts, vendors, or categories, and you can even go so far as to have some transactions categorized and added to your register without you ever reviewing them. Before I demonstrate how to create a bank rule, let me explain the two approaches you can take with rules. With the first approach, QuickBooks Online uses your rule to make changes to downloaded transactions, but then you must still review and approve them. So with this approach, QuickBooks Online just identifies transactions for which it finds and expects to apply a rule. On the Review tab, it displays a little rule icon next to these identified transactions in the Category or Match column. With the second approach, you can choose to have QuickBooks Online apply the rule to all transactions that it determines match the rule's conditions, and then add those transactions automatically without your review. To demonstrate this feature, I'm going to create a bank rule based on a vendor. Notice if I go to Banking and look at my transactions awaiting categorization in the checking account, I have several transactions with a new vendor called A Rental. They only rent equipment, so I know that any time a transaction appears from that vendor, it should be categorized under equipment rental in my chart of accounts. This is a perfect scenario for creating a bank rule. To create a bank rule, select Banking Rules from the navigation bar. In the upper right, select New Rule. Give the rule a name that is meaningful to you. In this case, I'm going to call it A Rental Expenses. In the For drop-down, choose whether this rule relates to money coming in or money going out. In this case, this rule applies to money that I am paying out to A Rental. In the In drop-down, choose the bank or credit card account that will be involved in this rule. In this case, the rule would apply for money I spend from any bank or credit card account, so I will select All Bank Accounts. Now you will need to set the conditions for your rule. Here you can add up to 5 lines. If I have more than one condition, I can select whether a transaction must meet all of them or just any of them, meaning if only one condition is met, the transaction will apply to this rule. I am only going to have one condition for this rule, but I'll select all. Amount is pretty obvious. That's the dollar amount of the transaction. So here I could say that this rule should only apply to transactions when the amount is greater than $500. But there are 2 other options, bank text and description. Bank text is the transaction detail QuickBooks Online receives from the bank. Depending on the bank, this may include information such as a store number, city, state, phone number, date, and even cryptic abbreviations of vendor or customer names. You can always expand your bank transactions in the bank feed to see the bank details. Sometimes that information helps me remember what this purchase was for. Description is the cleaned up interpretation of the bank text. For instance, QuickBooks Online might take a long string of bank text and shorten it to just Starbucks in the description. For this rule, I am going to select Bank Text, Contains, and type A rental. So if QuickBooks Online finds the words A rental anywhere in the bank text of a transaction, this rule will apply to that transaction. Now you need to set transaction type, category, and payee. For this rule, I want to assign the transaction type expense and select the category equipment rental. My payee is A rental. Now I don't believe they are saved as a vendor in my list yet, so I will add them right now. At the bottom of the form, notice I have an option that I could enable so that transactions targeted by this rule are automatically accepted into my register from the banking page. The transactions would come in, get adjusted by my rule, and get added to my account register without me ever reviewing the transaction. I am not going to turn on this feature, and I don't really recommend it. I think you should have to review all your transactions. Select Save. Now you have an active rule. Note that rules apply to unaccepted transactions only, transactions in the For Review tab on the banking screen. So creating a rule won't impact transactions that you have already added to your registers. Let's go back to Banking and look at awaiting transactions in the checking account. Notice that green indicators now show that QuickBooks Online has recognized the transactions that have been impacted by one of my rules. If I click on my $800 A rental transaction, the vendor name is already pre-filled and the category is already set to equipment rental. This saves me a bit of time, cuts down on potential errors, and allows me to just click Add. Notice that the $200 income I received from A rental did not get flagged by my rule because my rule was only created for money going out, not money coming in. I would need to create another rule to cover incoming money, such as refunds related to A rental. If you return to Banking Rules on the navigation bar, notice that you can copy, disable, or delete an existing bank rule from the Action column. I will select Copy on my current rule and call this A rental income. All I have to do is change the Money Out option to Money In and change the category to Refunds Allowances, and then click Save. Now, when I return to Banking and look at awaiting transactions in the checking account, that $200 refund from A rental is recognized by the rule I just created. So now you understand bank rules. If you have many predictable transactions, save yourself some time and create bank rules for them.